Hi, this is Brian with ActiveMelody.com. In this week's lesson, we're going to talk about 5 ideas for jazzing up your blues, taking a boring old blues progression and then injecting a little bit of class, a little bit of jazz into it. And these are easy to understand, easy to implement, so we're going to cover all 5 of them in this video. If you'd like to get the extra materials that go with this lesson, which include the on-screen tab viewer, interactive, you can highlight sections, slow them down, loop playback, all of that stuff, and also the tab PDF file. You can get those things by going to ActiveMelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page and do a search for EP483. Okay, so we're going to take the little blues intro that I played, and we're going to use that as our excuse to talk through these 5 different points. I kind of work them into that. Now remember, if you want the specific tablature of everything, note for note, you can get that by going to ActiveMelody.com. I'm going to try and talk through most of it in this video, though. I'm going to do my best. So that was a blues that was played in the key of D, and typically in a blues you have a 1-4-5 chord progression. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be injecting a 2-5-1 into our 1-4-5. I'm going to talk through that, and that's going to make a lot of sense. Now, I know I've already lost somebody out there. Somebody's going, what are these numbers? You keep hearing 1-4-5, 2-5-1. What does that mean? I've talked about this in other lessons, but I've got this down to an elevator pitch. I can just sort of quickly go over this. Even if you know this information, just bear with me. We all need to be on the same page, and so here's how we're going to do that. So when I'm talking about these numbers, 1-4-5, 2-5-1, what do I mean? Well, this song that we're going to be playing is in the key of D, our 1 chord. The root chord is a D chord. And those numbers come from the major scale of the key of the song. So the song's in the key of D, so it's the D major scale. You know the D major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You know that by ear, right? You could sing that. So that's the major scale. So those numbers, if we put a number to each of those notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then it repeats, we go back to 1, and it just keeps going octave after octave. And so that's where the numbers come from. So when I say 1-4-5, 1, 2, 3, 4, that note, which is a G, that's a G, I play a G chord. I go to my 5, that's an A note, I play an A chord. So what we have then is our 1 chord, which is D, our 4 chord, which is G, our 5 chord, which is A. Those are all major chords, D, G, and A. And that's 1, 4, and 5. Now your 2, 3, and 6, those numbers out of that major scale, those are minor chords. So your 1, 4, and 5 are major, your 2, 3, and 6 are minor, and then that only leaves the 7 chord, and then the 7 chord is a half diminished. And that one sort of always gets swept under the rug, unfortunately. It's just not that commonly used. And so that's why it doesn't get talked about as much. The main chords you need to really focus on when you're trying to understand this concept are your 1s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Remember, 1, 4, and 5 are major, 2, 3, and 6 are minor. So let me just play through those chords. In the key of D, you have your 1 chord, which is major, your 2, which is minor, that's an E minor, C sharp minor for your 3. Then you go to major 4, major 5, which is A. I'm sorry, your 4 was a G, your 5 is an A. And then you come up here to a B minor, which is your 6 chord. So there's your 1 through 6. So now from that, if I were to say 1-4-5 chord, you understand what those chords are, and you understand how to find them. You can use that formula. 1, 4, and 5 are major, 2, 3, and 6 are minor. And they come from the major scale of whatever key you're in. All right, so now that we've got that little bit of theory out of the way, when I start on the first chord, it's a tension chord, that's my 5 chord, because it's an A, A7. And then I went like this. So I went right into the D chord, which is my 1 chord. I started by sliding in 3rd fret, this is all playing on the 2nd string, 3rd fret, we slide up to the 7th fret. And then watch this. Now what is that? That's a D chord using the top part of my A shape. There's my A chord shape from the cage system, here's the top part of that. I'm just playing that little triad there. So I played this. Right into my D chord. Now here's the first little jazz idea that I want to work in. Is going right into the 4 chord. It's called a quick change to your 4 chord. You can do this in blues too. That's not anything that's limited to jazz, but I hear it a lot more in a jazz blues. You do a quick change to the 4 chord. So you know what your 4 chord is, right? And you know what quick means, and you know what change means. So hopefully you can just take the terminology there and kind of work it out yourself. But in essence, in a quick change, you're quickly going to the 4 chord and then back to your 1 chord. Let me demonstrate. So in a typical blues, you're going to be on the 1 chord, right? 3, these are measures. 4, then we go to the 4 chord. 1, 2, and then we go back to the 1 chord, right? That's your typical blues format. You can follow me there. But in a quick change, it goes like this. We go 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to go to the 4 chord. 1, and now everything is the same as it would be. So you can hear that quick change, sort of just a quick way to introduce the 4 chord before you're officially committed to the 4 chord. That's probably the best way to say that. Now I'm giving that example playing a blues shuffle, but what if there was a different vibe, different cadence to the song? So what if you had something like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's doing the same thing. It's 1, which is my D, 4, which is my G, back to my 1. These are just little embellishments. When I'm doing that, it's a D6 to a D9. They're all versions of D, but it's still D. You would just categorize that as D. So when I'm playing a D9, that's still just a D. That's still my 1 chord. When I'm playing a G13, that's still my 4 chord. Even though it's not just a straight up D major and a straight up G major, I can use these extensions. And that's the second little point, is you can use extensions on your chords. When extensions are just the numbers. So you have like, your major chord and then you have your minor chords, but then you can put in numbers to those and give them different feels, different sounds. And that's where I'm sure that there's going to be some confusion. What do you mean extensions? Like, how do I know which ones to focus on? Well, the big ones, in my opinion, are like your 6 chord and your 9 chord. I talk about that all the time because they're easy to hear for me and they're easy to play, and it doesn't get super complicated. We're not talking about a sharp this and a sharp. We're just talking about a 6 chord and a 9 chord, or 13 chord. That's another one that I might focus on. Start with those. Those are good ones. And I talk about the 6 chord to the 9 chord all the time for that very reason. But those are extensions off of those major chords. Just remember, when we're talking about major chords, the major part has to stay. You couldn't play like a D minor 9. That's not going to work. It has to be major. As long as the major part is there, the extension, you can put whatever you want in there just to give it a different vibe. So we talked about 2 things, the quick change and then the chord extension. Those are 2 things you can add to your blues right away. All right, let's back this up from the beginning. So we'll start with that A7. Which is our 5 chord, right into the 1 chord. Here's the quick change. And back to the 1 chord. Now that quick change, I did that. That's just a walk up. The whole point, the category that we're talking about is the G. And I played a G7. So it wasn't a G major, it was a G7. But I walked up to it. And that you could do that. That was a chromatic walk. Open, 1st, 2nd, 3rd on the 6th string. And then I went into a G7 chord and played that. Now here's another little tip for you, is when you're playing a 7 chord like this, that's just the same as playing my G chord, but take my pinky out of it, right? So you got that note in there. Give it that nice 7 sound. But you can always hammer on your middle finger. Watch this. When you play the chord, it just blueses it up a little bit. Okay, so we went into the G, and I played this is like a little embellishment, a little lick off of that chord, holding down strings 1 and 2 on the 3rd fret. Those are 2 notes that are in the chord anyway. Then I come up here, while I hold that down, up to here to the 5th fret 2nd string and do a half bend release. Not a full bend, but a half. And then after that, watch this. This is the 3rd point I want to talk about, which is this. Sliding into chords. You hear this in jazz all the time. I'll give you some examples. But what I'm doing is I'm going back to my D chord, using that triad there, top part of the A shape. But I'm just starting a half step down, just playing strings 1 and 2, and sliding into that, and then playing the chord. It's a very classy thing that you can do to your chords, and it's so easy. You just go to wherever you're going to end up, and then you go down a half step, or you go above it a half step. So that doesn't work on major chords so well. So let me show you this. This will give you an idea what I'm talking about. So if I'm talking about a D major chord, and I slide into a D major chord, yeah, okay, it kind of works, but not really. So that doesn't work so well. Watch this though, if I go like play a D9. Now that works. That works really well. I can even slide from above, and that works too. But if I just do a D major, it sounds like that Linda Ronstadt song, When Will I Be Loved? Isn't that what it's called? Anyway, you get a totally different vibe than sliding in that way. So just keep that idea in mind. When you're playing your blues and you go into your like 4 chord, you can slide into it from above or below. It works really well on a 6 chord or a 9 chord. When you get into those just plain major chords, it doesn't work so well. All right, so those are 3 things we've talked about now. We've talked about the quick change from the 1 to the 4 chord. We've talked about chord extensions to make our chords sound a little classier, a little jazzier. And then we've talked about sliding into chords to kind of jazz it up that way. From the beginning, we have... And I did that while I'm playing that major triad there. Pinky goes down on the 7th fret 1st string to give me a D6, right? Another example of an extension. Now the next thing we're going to play, watch this. Now we're getting serious about this jazz stuff, right? So this is the 4th concept, and this is probably the biggest one. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our 1-4-5 blues, but we're going to inject a 2-5-1 turnaround in the middle of our 1-4-5 blues. What? That sounds crazy, but it's actually very logical when you understand it. So when I say 2-5-1, I'm not talking about the key of the song. I'm talking about the G chord. We're going to the G chord at this point in the song, which is our 4 chord. So I'm going to play the 2-5-1 of the G chord. So the 1 in this case is the G chord itself. So that's the 1. So now I have to ask myself, I have to work backwards a little bit. I have to say, okay, so if we're going to the G chord and the G chord is the 1, well, what's the 2 of the G chord? Here's a quick formula for that. If you're using your E shape, you just go up 2 frets and play your E minor shape. Be an A minor in that case. And a little sidebar, if you were playing out of your A shape, like if your major chord was an A shape and you're asking yourself what's the 2 chord of it, you do the same thing, you go up 2 frets but play your A minor shape. So that's another little sidebar, an easy way to find your 2 chord. Let's go back to our G. So we're going to go up 2 frets, we're going to play an A minor, that's our 2 chord. Now we're going to play the 5 chord of G, but the 5 chord of G is D, which happens to be the key of the song we're in. If you don't know your 5 chord, you can always just use the major scale. So you take your G and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it's that note. So that's your D note. Therefore, you play the 7 chord of that. So the dominant 7 chord. So we have our 2, we have our 5, and then that resolves to its 1, which is our G. So that's the big thing that really differentiates this way of playing versus the standard 1-4-5 without any other variations, is adding a 2-5-1 in the middle of it. And this only works in 2 spots. It doesn't work over the 5 chord. It doesn't work doing a 2-5-1 to get you to the 5 chord. It works going from the 1 chord to the 4 chord. That's a really good one. That's the one you hear the most probably. And then the other one that I guess works equally as well is going from the 5 chord back to the 1 chord. In that case, you'd play the 2-5-1 of the key of the song. So, and we're going to do that actually. In this example, we're going to do that. We're not there yet, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. But for now, just know that we've played a 2, which is our A minor. I did a little embellishment by adding my pinky to the 7th fret 1st string, making like an A minor. And then I played a D7, and I played it right here. And then I went to the G. Now, I did one other step there. I went and added this little chord, which is like adding a C chord and then getting to the G. And honestly, I wasn't thinking about that when I played that. I was just thinking about getting to this one chord, which is our G chord in this case, right? And I was just thinking about kind of the gospel thing where you go from the 1 to the 4. Anyway, that's what it is. It's a little embellishment there. So the real meat to this is the 2-5-1. 2-5-1. And then once I get to the G, another little embellishment. Pinky goes down on the 5th fret 2nd string. Okay, now here's the last thing that we're going to work in. This is the last jazz blues idea. And that's playing whatever your 4 chord is. You play the sharp 4 diminished 7 chord. So when I'm playing this G chord, my goal is to get back to the 1 chord. So in a typical blues, you'd have your 4, and then you'd go back to the 1 right here. Back to my D. But there's an in-between chord. So you've got your 4, then you can do your 4 sharp diminished 7, and then back to your 1. Right? You've heard that. And that's where that comes from, is that sharp diminished 7 chord. And it works really well going from the 4 back to the 1 chord. That's a great place to learn that. So I think of this as a G sharp diminished 7. And my pinky is on a G sharp note. And so my ring finger then goes on that. So that's on the 4th fret 1st string. My ring finger goes down the 4th fret 3rd string. And then on these strings 2 and 4, we go to the 3rd fret and play middle finger and then index finger. And that's your G sharp diminished 7. There's your G sharp note, just as a reference. And then there's the chord that follows it. Nice thing about this chord is it's one of those symmetrical chords. You can take it and go up 3 frets, play the same chord, 3 frets. It's the same notes, they're just changing order. So you could do all kinds of licks around there. You know, things with that chord. So that's a bonus tip that you can add to your blues to sort of jazz it up. All right, let's back it up from the beginning. Here's the sharp diminished. And then after that I went. The way that I played this was on the 2nd string here, 5th fret. There's a hammer-on pull-off between the 5th fret and 6th fret. And then I come down to the 7th fret 3rd string. Actually, that was a hammer-on to that. I don't think I picked that. And then we go 5, 4, down to the 2nd fret. That's all on the 3rd string. But when you play that 2nd fret, play it with your middle finger so that you can make the D7 chord. So I played it like this. There's a slide there between the 5th and 4th fret. Okay, so now this is the last thing I want to mention, and that's where we go. There's your 2, 5, back to your 1. So there's another 2-5-1, but before the 2, there was another chord. What's that? Well, that's what people consider a 6 chord, but that's a 6 major. Remember I told you the 6 chord is minor. 2, 3, and 6 are always minor. Not always. You can make them major. I know this is where it gets weird. Is that a borrowed chord from another key? Yeah, I guess it would be, because it technically wouldn't fit, because that wouldn't be a major chord, because we went through the formula for that. But you can also think of this, and so that's a B7. I just played a B7 here using that E7 shape. And then I put my pinky up here to complete the chord on the 10th fret 2nd string. There's that hammer on like I showed you with your middle finger to blues up a chord. And then right on top of that is my E minor. That's my 2. Then I go down and play the same 7 chord shape here, which would be an A7, and then we go back to the 1 chord, which is our D. The other way to think about this B7 chord is that would be the 5 chord of your E minor, which is the 2. So it's like the 5 chord of the 2, and then you play the 2, 5, 1. I know that's getting weird. That's called a secondary dominant chord when you do it that way. But anyway, that's another really common turnaround. 6, 5, 2, 1. And the 6 is major. And so just keep that in mind. You've heard that in a million songs and maybe just didn't know the numbers or the reasoning behind it, but that's what's going on. 6, 2, 5, 1. Okay, so I went to the E minor and played a little lick there out of the E natural minor scale. 10th fret first string, down to the 7th fret, and then we go down to the 2nd string and play 8, 7, and then 9th fret 3rd string, and then I strum the chord. That's just the top part of that, using the A minor shape. And then down to my A7. Now watch this. Little major pentatonic scale lick from D. Even though the song was staying on that A7, I should have held it out a little longer, but I went ahead and played ahead of the beat and got us back to our D. You can do that. That's another thing, is when you're on the 5 chord and you're about to go to the 1 chord, you can go ahead and start playing licks from the 1 chord, even though the song isn't there yet, and that works. It's just playing ahead of the beat. So I'm playing the the D major pentatonic scale. Sliding up to the 7th fret 2nd string, 5th fret 1st string, and then sliding it back. And by the way, those are just 2 notes from the D triad that we started with. Slide it down with your ring finger down to the 5th fret, 3rd fret, all on the 2nd string, and then 4th fret 3rd string, back to this D note here on the 3rd fret 2nd string, and then you hit your open D string. And then I concluded with this like. Let me show you that. So I was just thinking about my D7 chord right here. I'm on strings 2 and 4, 7th fret. I keep that ring finger on the 7th fret 2nd string, and I just walk down the 4th string like this. So it's 7, 6, 5, and then we go into this shape, which would be like my D7 here. 4th fret 4th string, 3rd fret 2nd string. So, and then the last thing, sliding into a chord just like we talked about with an extension. So I'm trying to get to the D9, so I just started a half step up, and then pinky goes down on the 7th fret 1st string to make a D13 chord. All right, well hopefully that gives you some ideas for some different things you can add to your blues right away to jazz it up a little bit. And if you haven't checked out ActiveMelody.com, I would encourage you to do that. I've got over 10 years worth of in-depth lessons like this, and they're all designed to help you improvise and just be better at jamming, better at writing your own music and coming up with your own ideas. And that's what that's all about. I just share the stuff that I learn and try and pass it all along to you. So if you haven't checked it out, I would encourage you to do that. Also, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would encourage you to do that. Just click the subscribe button, click the alert bell, and that way you can be notified. I put out often multiple videos during the week, but definitely at least one a week. And then you can just sort of stay in touch and know when I've got something new that comes out. All right, we'll see you next week for something new.